Welcome back to Tolkien with Friends. When it comes to The Hobbit and Unexpected Journey, I feel like this is the episode I've been the most excited about because today we'll be talking about Chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark. But before we dive in, we are so excited to welcome Minhas to the podcast. And welcome, Minhas. We're so happy to have you. And if you want to just let everybody know, for right off the bat, pause it, go follow Minhas wherever Minhas wants you to go follow. So now this is your chance to let people know where to find you on social media.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. You can follow me on Minhas Morgul on everything, and it's spelled just like the place except for has an H. So Minhas Morgul instead of Minas Morgul. Anywhere you can find me. I do post most on TikTok. I have the most fun on TikTok, so I think you'll get the most bang for your buck there. But I am on other platforms as well.
Cool. Awesome. Yes. I mean, TikTok is definitely where we ran across each other. And I mean, obviously the username is Chef's Kiss. Mm-hmm. I was like, this sounds like my kind of person.
Yeah. I love that we got to all really come together because of just literally this one platform. It's been amazing.
I know. And it's such a wild platform, I feel like, where Instagram, I mean, when it was just me before I started like the podcast version of, my account, I was mainly stuck to kind of some like artists that I like to follow, as well as like my really good friends. But then like TikTok, I think has been one of those where, I don't know, I've met so many more like-minded people than I have like on any platform. And I know that TikTok and like the algorithm is kind of weird. Like sometimes it just completely breaks and it's like, why am I seeing this? Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it's been a pretty positive experience.
Yeah. So. And if it's not, you can change it to make it so.
Yeah.
You can fix it.
You can fix it. Yeah, there are tricks of the trade. Awesome. So everybody make sure go and, get on TikTok, get on Instagram, wherever you like to follow folks, and do that. And now I know we're all really excited to talk about this chapter. It's a really good one, and it's some really beautiful performances by Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis. But first, we've been talking about kind of, just kind of being transparent about how we've come to The Hobbit in our experience. I know that it's been kind of hit or miss for me. I know Callie at the outset was like, I'm going to come at this podcast with, what was it, like,
I'm just
what was the phrase that you used? Like,
I don't even remember. But
yeah, just like insane positivity. It was a good phrase. But I can't remember. But like unapologetically positive or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. Actually,
that's how Callie's approaching today. Minhas, I'd love to. I think it is. Maybe you get it. But Minhas, I'd love to hear, like, what has your journey been with The Hobbit, the book and the films? Where are we at with you today?
Yeah, well, so I first read The Hobbit. The Hobbit was actually my introduction to Tolkien's world, and I read it when I was very, very young. When I was 10 years old, I guess is the age you're supposed to read it. And rereading it now for this podcast, I was like, wow, 10 years old is a great age to get this introduction, especially with The Hobbit. And then I watched the 1970s Hobbit movie because we watched that in class when I was 10 years old. And 10 years old, nice. I did not like it because I was 10. I rewatched it recently, and I'm like, this is a piece of art. I did not do this movie justice when I was 10 years old. And I will talk about that, especially this chapter, because I do like referencing that movie and the Hobbit movies and this book. Like this chapter is very pivotal for those three movies and those three pieces of literature. Right. In terms of the actual Hobbit movies, the live action ones, I'm kind of more with Callie on this one. I love them. I don't know. It's hard for me not to enjoy it. It's same with Rings of Power, and everyone has this kind of weird feelings about them. But I'm like, I don't know. It's fun for me, but I do have my qualms with it. I have my qualms with Rings of Power as well. Right. But they're overshadowed by how much I love being in that world and that series. It's really fun, and I'm not going to pretend it's Lord of the Rings, but you're not looking into it like it's Lord of the Rings. You're looking into it as if it's its own thing. And it's beautiful, visually beautiful. It's nice to see the actors. The actors do a phenomenal job. Even seeing Legolas and Toriel again. I mean, seeing Legolas again and Toriel for the first time. It's nice. I thought they did what they could with the source material they had and with the restrictions of production on their back, right? There's a lot going into it. So I think with what they had, they did a beautiful piece of work.
Love it. I think that's a great way to look at the Hobbit movies. I think that's definitely a way that you should look at the Hobbit movies and enjoy them a lot more. I think that my experience has been colored by the fact that, you know, just by, like, Lord of the Rings, I feel like captured the vibe so well, and I was expecting it to capture the vibe of the book again, but this time it's kind of a mishmash in some ways. Like, it's kind of trying to be like a prequel to this epic, so trying to still maintain the epicness, but also, like, it's trying to be silly, but I'm like, I think I was imagining more whimsy than silly. Do you know what I mean? Like, just insofar as, like, when I sat down to watch this movies for the first time in theaters, but I will say, at the same time, I was so ready to be back in Middle Earth. I did watch the first Hobbit movie like 3 times in theaters, like going with various different groups of people. Be like, oh, you haven't seen it yet? Let's go.
The first one was definitely, I think, the best one. I like the other two because it has Thranduil in it.
Right.
But in terms of storytelling wise, the first one is, of course. But the first one, storytelling wise, I think is the best one.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that, so Anna, who, I think that's totally fair in all the ways. Like, Anna, I've been talking to her and she's like, I'm gonna come back, I swear. I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, if you do, like, come back sometimes or whatever you want. Because she is my best friend and she hosted it with me for the most of Lord of the Rings. And she's like, but I do want to come back for Lee Pace. And I'm like, I get it. So you may see her for that. We'll see.
Nice. He's bringing the world together.
Yeah. He's a special guy. And that's the thing about these movies, is that it's like, you can't really knock the actors at all. They're all so good. You know what I mean? And just watching them go through it, I don't know. They're really good at what they do. So I would never shit on the actors for anything in these movies. You know what I mean? Like, there's other things that I take issue with, but it's not any, like, one person's fault or anything like that. Like,
and I think one thing is important to remember is Peter Jackson came in after, so it actually belonged to Guillermo, who has a completely different directing style. And I personally, a lot of people disagree with me, I personally would have loved to see his rendition of The Hobbit.
Okay, same. And somebody tried to tell me, like, I don't think we needed it. Like, I think it would have been too weird. And I'm like, no, I think that's exactly what these Tolkien nerds needed, was weird. Yeah. Because now we've kind of got this thing that I think we've seen with Rings of Power, where people are like, it's not Peter Jackson's Middle Earth. And I'm like, it never was, guys. Like, it was Ralph Bakshi's first, you know, it was Rankin and Bass's before that. Like, it's it's whatever. So I think it would have been really cool to see, and I kind of think it would have reset some people's brains about what Middle Earth is supposed to look like.
Especially since he's such a visual storyteller. If you look at Crimson Peak and then even the new Pinocchio and see those stylized... Okay, so even let's do something more fantasy.
I wanted his Smaug really bad. I will say that.
He actually worked on this fantasy series called Troll Hunters, which actually does have orcs and kind of similar creatures in it too. So if you base off of that fantasy series, he's such a visually amazing, beautiful creator that I think The Hobbit, especially if you're rereading The Hobbit, I could imagine him doing it so beautifully.
I agree.
Yeah,
especially with seeing, like, Pinocchio being able to have, like, it is whimsical and it is fun, but there's also serious, you know, there's, like, heart-wrenching moments at the same time. He could have done it, and we all know it. We all know it.
Yeah, I saw some of the art renderings for Galmo's version of the orcs, and they were so beautiful. Honestly, I was like, I wish we could have, because his version of Azog was completely different than the one we got in the movie. And it's just, Yeah, it kind of breaks my heart a little. I mean, I'm not shitting on Jackson at all.
No.
I literally just said I love these movies, even though a lot of people don't. But I do have.
Both can be true.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, I do mourn a little.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. Okay, so I think that means that we need to talk about this chapter.
Let's do
it. So let's check in where we last left our company. But because of last time we had to kind of skip over this part because of the way Peter intercuts the previous chapter with Riddles in the Dark. So we just kind of ignored it. Last time we were like, sorry, Bilbo, we're not going to talk about you. So now we're going to focus in on him and Gollum now. So, at this point in the books, Bilbo and crew had nearly escaped from the goblins, and, they had to pass Bilbo around and carry him because he wasn't as fast. And at the time, he was being carried by Dory, but he was pulled out from under Bilbo by the goblins, who were wearing their soft shoes, so they weren't heard, and, causing Bilbo to fall and be left behind. And so for the rest of this chapter, we do not see the dwarves or Gandalf again, and instead are left with, poor old Bilbo stuck in the heart of the mountain. In contrast, the films have left Bilbo behind almost as soon as they are captured by the dwarves. He just crouches and these tiny goblins don't see him. I don't know. It's whatever. So they don't see him. He gets into a fight with one extra goblin and they fall during their fight. And, as we saw last time, they intercut between the Bilbo's encounter with Gollum and the dwarves fighting the goblins. And for me, this is the point where I think it's where they make one of the biggest mistakes of this part of the movie. So, if you've ever heard me talk about the Hobbit movies before, my biggest complaint, I would let them get away with so much and it would not bother me, but the part of the fact that they've decentered Bilbo from it is what kind of breaks my heart the most. It's while yes, it's a quest for the dwarves problem, whatever, we're experiencing it through Bilbo's eyes, or we should be. And at the heart of it, it's really, Bilbo discovering himself and the type of hobbit or person that he wants to be. He starts off kind of there's a little fire in there, but it hasn't been stoked, right? He's very comfortable with the way things are, not really doing anything outlandish or crazy, but then he comes out the other side courageous and clever, and he puts others before him. He's a solution finder. He has this whole growth story, and I think this movie had a real chance with Riddles in the Dark to put Bilbo back at the heart of the story by not intercutting between this fight and I know they wanted to have the reveal of Gandalf or whatever and kind of the video game fight that happens, but if we had really just stayed with Bilbo and Gollum, I think that would have been such a treat, and I think it really would have helped with telling Bilbo's story. But I could be wrong. I've admitted to being wrong before. I don't know how you guys feel about that part, but those were my initial feelings, just thinking about it overall.
Yeah, well, I do see where you're coming from, and I'm going to bounce off of what you were saying. And I'm not actually going to say this as a negative or positive, but I think Jackson, at that point, made a decision that it wasn't Bilbo's story anymore. And since that moment, the story isn't about Bilbo anymore. And we even see that later in the Battle of the Five Armies, which literally is just this much in the book. Yeah. It's a 3-hour movie, right? And I think he does that with Lord of the Rings as well, to an extent, where he cares more about the epic battles versus the interpersonal relationships between the characters, right? Mm-hmm. He does a lot more interpersonal relationships in The Lord of the Rings. He doesn't lose a lot, but in this situation, we really do lose it in this movie. It isn't about Bilbo at all, and the focus is on the king, the battles, and the mountain. And this scene really exemplifies that. That being said, I guess it's because we've read the book so much. My brain just chops it. It's the whole Bilbo scenes in my brain are together, and then the whole dwarf scenes are separate. But then, when I'm watching, I'm like, oh, really? It's not like that. But when I remember the movie, I don't remember. Totally.
I didn't remember this either. I was just like, oh, Bilbo time. And I was like, hey, hey, don't go back
we
to
had
them.
a moment when we were organizing, studying for this. We were like, oh shoot, we go forward, then we go back, and then we go forward, then we go back. And, but you're right, though. I do remember it as like one immersive scene as well. So that's interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah. I mean, but I think you're right. It isn't, I mean, they still keep it The Hobbit, but they're more like, it's more the unexpected journey than it is The Hobbit. Do you know what I mean? It's more the subtitle than it is the main title.
Yeah. It's the journey of King Durin plus Bilbo.
Yeah.
Whereas the books are Bilbo plus the journey of of the Durin King.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it is true. It's like they are kind of just like it just works out for them. But it, you know, but like I don't know, like I understand that they have to get away from that. They get away from it a little bit in Lord of the Rings because there isn't that like point of view type of thing that Tolkien does. But this is all like from Bilbo. So I don't know. It's a choice. It's a choice. So that is the choice that was made. And that's where we are. So however, I did think it was interesting to have Bilbo trying to like fight one of the goblins, because like in the books we really don't see Bilbo try to fight anybody until the spiders, you know. So they have Bilbo give it a shot, but you know he falls with the goblin, only to find Gollum. And I believe they do this because the book does say that Gollum would wear the ring when he was very, very hungry and go looking for stray goblins. So they like actually show him finish the job on this wounded goblin. But Gollum was definitely not wearing the ring. He you know, and obviously the scene is like very lit instead of being like the super darkness. Because they want to show us this ring fall off of Gollum's loincloth. But I'm pretty sure that Gollum wears pants in the book. Because
he has pockets.
He has pockets.
Yeah. They're very unclear about those pockets.
Right.
Where like, they are.
Like,
they're clear about
you think it's like a fanny pack?
Yeah, he's like, what do I have in my pocket?
Like
fish,
Dad
bones.
Yeah. I bet he's wearing some really raggedy ass pants like Bilbo. Like, that's
or
my
a
guess.
shirt and no pants. Like, it's not really clear. He could just have a pocket that's like tied to a string. Who knows?
Yeah,
it could
that's
be anything.
true.
Yeah,
that's true. I just don't think Tolkien was thinking of being naked.
I know. Yeah, it's so funny because when I was reading this chapter and rewatching the movie, and then I also went and rewatched the scene in the 70s movie just because I had to. And I was also looking up at fan art for this scene in particular of Gollum, and everyone laughs at that one from Europe where it's just like a big kind of troll looking. It's so gorgeous.
Where he's kind of like, it's not like a super defined. I mean, he's
it's like a mountain
cousin
looking.
or set.
Yeah. And I was like, you know, we have this whole idea, and everyone in the comments when I first saw that video about that art was like, that doesn't make sense for Gollum. And I'm like, but let's really think about it. Why doesn't it make sense? We don't really have so much information, right? Yeah. What we know, and in the books, they don't really do this in the movie either with movie Gollum. In the books, there's these moments where we can transport it back to when he was from the world above. So we're looking at this other perspective before even Lord of the Rings was written, because this is just The Hobbit, right? I like to look at things compartmentalized.
Yeah.
So we don't know anything. We don't know that he used to be a hobbit, like how we kind of come to learn now. We don't know anything about all we know is he used to live in the world above. His grandmother made some food for him and whatnot.
Taught him how to suck eggs.
Yeah. So there's no real indication of what kind of creature he would have been above the land. So when you see the ones that are other fan arts are like really like he looks more like a frog. He kind of looks really like lizardy or whatnot. And even in the 70s movies, he looks more like a lizard. This creature could have been a creature from above. Like there's nothing that says that kind of creature can't live in the above land and then move to below. And another thing I found really interesting in this chapter, which I guess this is really Bilbo focused, but I just think Gollum is so compelling. Yeah. They even mentioned before he became wretched. They actually specifically say that in this chapter as well. And what's interesting about this chapter between these two characters is this kind of dichotomy between Bilbo, who is very like innocent and just trying to go on an adventure, and Gollum, who is like been living in these caves for so long and has lost who he was as a person.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting to see these moments, like why Gollum finds Bilbo so compelling and just doesn't eat them right away, because he is at a point in his life where he is completely a monster to the outsider. He just eats goblins, he just eats fish, he like murders as he sees fit. He
Yeah,
doesn't do that right away.
Right. I know, and it's like movie Gollum, it's I mean, of course, like, we can't really talk about this part without talking about the performances of Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis. Just like, I think that they play off each other really well. And you also see, like, the team over at Weta have just killed it with Gollum's design, you know? Like, he looks so good in that scene, you know what I mean? Like, you could touch him, and he's got all these facial expressions, and he's super expressive, and like the way he moves around is really cool. But with all of that, I think that, and you know, there's so many things about the scene, because like in the movie they're really playing off of the kind of multiple personalities thing that Peter started in, you know, Lord of the Rings, which is really, he does talk to himself, but in here it's specifically reasoned as because he doesn't have anyone else to talk to, right? And that's kind of how he started doing that, and it's just so interesting with you know, the whole Riddles scene, which I think it's so good, and I really kind of wish it would have gone on longer. And I know that and it's like, I'm watching the extended, like, throw me a couple more riddles, my guy. Like, I noticed that they cut a few, and I wrote them down just because I thought, honestly, like, these aren't the easy riddles that they cut. Like, when I read them, I still don't remember the answers until they tell me.
I'm not.
So even when they tell the answer, I'm like, I don't really get it.
I would have gotten
it's so like the one where Bilbo's like, an eye in a blue face saw an eye in a green face. That eye is like to this eye, said the first eye, but in low place, not high place. And the fact that Gollum comes up with the answer blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like, and also Bilbo's like, you know, there's a couple of creepy Gollum ones, like the one about the dark and fish, which I like the fish one. I kind of wish that had been in there, like the never thirsty, ever drinking, all in mail, never clinking. I think that's cute. But then, and then Bilbo throws out, no legs lay on one leg, two legs sat near on three legs, four legs get some, or got some. And I'm like,
and Gollum knew it, and I
answers it.
And when I saw the answer, I'm like, I still don't get it. That very specifically, I was like, what does this mean? What does this mean?
So I'm like, so the fish is on a table that only has one leg, and then the man is sitting at a stool that has three legs. Why does the stool have more legs than the table? It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
And then the cat has the bone.
Maybe we're just out of time.
Yeah.
Maybe this is something that made sense.
Somebody show me a table with one leg. Because I think of a stool, like, I guess stools have three legs. But like, why? I don't know. I don't know. But
I didn't get it.
Gollum somehow pulls that out of his butt. And, you know, all of that to say that the riddle scene really brings me back to what we were talking about early on when we were recording for Fellowship, when Gandalf is trying to explain to Frodo that Gollum, not just the point about Bilbo and Gollum, but how Gollum was most likely related to hobbits, right? And how and it just, like, that idea disgusts Frodo at first. Like, he's like, no. But the fact that Gollum is able to guess these answers, like, and where I fail horrifically, like, it says a lot to me about who Gollum was before the ring.
Yes.
You know?
I think what's also interesting, and I know I talked about this earlier, when we see those moments of seeing him in his life before, and but this is supposed to be the introduction to Gollum.
Mm-hmm.
But for everyone else, it's not. Lord of the Rings is the introduction to Gollum, usually when you're watching into the movies. And I
Right.
think the way when we see that changes the way we interact with this scene. And it's almost
Mm-hmm.
detriment, right? Because this is a beautiful introduction to this character. And really, it says a lot of who he is as a person and really sets him up for the rest of this book and the trilogy after.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're going into the movie and you've seen Lord of the Rings and you see this, you already have that preset in mind of who he is in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And you're not learning about him, you're remembering about him.
Mm,
So I
yeah.
think it's interesting when you see it like that. And you're right when it is a bit more of the dual personality thing with him. It's because we have that preconceived notion. But in this book, for the first time you see him talking to himself. For the first time you see him kind of being like, oh, what's going on? We should do this, kind of plan it out. And I think the pivotal scene here that is important is at the end. And they show this in the movie as well. I don't know how I feel about the impact in the movie when Bilbo is looking at Gollum crying.
Yeah. I definitely have notes on that. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
if you want to say your notes on that, feel free. Because I was like, I just feel like in the book it was more impactful because you really feel bad. Yeah.
Yes.
Please
The thing that I wrote down specifically, well, one more thing about like them the paralleling each other is the way that Tolkien even sets up the riddle game. So where like in the movie, it's Bilbo's idea where he's talking to the Smeagol side of Gollum, right? He's talking to like who's like much more childlike in this version of the story, and he's like, hey, what if we played a riddle game, like just you and me? But then it's funny because it's clearly Gollum, like the kind of stinker side of him, that is the one giving the riddles back to Bilbo. So I'm like, all right, that didn't really work, but okay. But the way that it's set up in the book is Gollum offers up the riddle game because he's trying to buy time, and the way that he writes this is that Gollum notices Bilbo's sword, and he suggests the riddle game because he was anxious to appear friendly, at any rate for the moment, until he found out more about the sword and the Hobbit, whether he was quite alone really, or whether he was good to eat, and whether Gollum was really hungry. Like Gollum hadn't figured that out yet. And Bilbo responds very well, because he was anxious to agree until he found out more about the creature, whether he was quite alone, whether he was fierce or hungry, and whether he was a friend of the goblins. So even here, the way they're thinking is very similar, which obviously you can't see that in the movie because we don't switch into their brains, but I thought it drives home the point that we see later about how Gollum and Bilbo and, hobbits aren't really so different after all.
Yeah, but then it's curious that Gollum didn't know what Bilbo was, because he's like, "What's a hobbit?" But I guess if the only way that makes sense is if we're using Rings of Power logic, where it's kind of like this pre-evolution version of them. So it maybe, or it's like Homo sapiens and Neanderthal kind of relation. I'm thinking too much into this children's brain.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, I mean, he's had the ring for like 500 years, and it's just like, who knows what they would have referred to themselves as, and he didn't, you know what I mean? Like,
and maybe he forgot. It's like very likely he forgot too, right?
Yeah,
he even forgot.
Yeah, it's like part of
the
his
sun felt.
Humanity. Hobbit-manity.
And that's one thing that they do say about Gollum, is that he tries not to think about life outside the map. It like makes him upset when Bilbo brings up these riddles that Gandalf explains later that he's like kind of enjoying it, but he's also hating it at the same time, because he tries not to think about those times before the ring because it makes him upset, know. So it could be suppressed for sure. So we have this version of Gollum who is like, I mean, I think he works in the case of the movie. I think that like Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis are wonderful together. He looks stunning. But then, we come to the end where Bilbo's trying to escape. we see Bilbo run from Gollum, and in his attempt to escape, he gets so this is the movie only. So he gets stuck between some rocks, and causing the buttons to fly off, which is their nod to when he gets out the door in the book. He that doesn't happen until he's like gotten away from Gollum. He's having to get past the goblins at that point, and he gets stuck in their door to the outside world, and his buttons fly off, and that's kind of like the last that the goblins see of Bilbo. So they try to throw it in here because they give Bilbo a different exit point in the movie. And it's funny to me because like Bilbo falls like right on the other side of that opening, and then they do the whole thing where like the ring flies up and perfectly lands on one of Bilbo's fingers, like they do in Fellowship. But like to me, I'm like, okay, but like Gollum knows how the ring works. Like, how did he not just like jump on him? He just saw him. You know what I mean? But in the book, Bilbo has ran ahead of Gollum, and Gollum hasn't caught up to him quite yet. In the movie, he's like right on top of him, but he hasn't caught up to him quite yet, and he's like, what is this in my pocket? Like, actually, like, what is he so mad about? And he puts his hand in there right as he falls, and so then it slips on, and in the dark and everything, like, Gollum leaps over him because he fell down. He doesn't bump into him, and he just keeps going, and eventually showing him the way out. But I think here's what we were talking about just 2 seconds ago about the difference for how Bilbo deals with getting out and how Gollum reacts, right? So Gollum's still blocking the door either way. It's a slightly different structure, but he's blocking the exit. Obviously in the movie we see the dwarves and Gandalf get out that way. He's like, what? So and this is the moment that we hear Gandalf talk to a lot about later, about pity and mercy. And Bilbo decides to jump over Gollum, but not without accidentally kicking him in the head, which I'm like, okay. But, like, I was actually very surprised by how well Bilbo was able to jump in the book. Does anybody, where it was like 7 feet forward and 3 feet up?
I was like, forget the leap of Baron. We're talking about the leap of Bilbo here.
Yeah,
I know, right?
And how he narrowly avoids hitting his head on the top, and
it's really amazing. I mean, like, what is the Bilbo workout routine?
Right?
I need to know.
It's 10 meals.
So, I love the way that this part is described in the book, and especially because it's much more clear about Gollum's abilities to not only see in the dark, but to hear and smell.
Yes.
He can smell the goblins. He, as soon as Bilbo moves, like in that part, he stiffens. And Bilbo could see or feel that Gollum was tense as a bowstring gathered for a spring. So Gollum, in vastly different from the way the movie shows it, where it's Gollum has no idea that Bilbo's right behind him, and he's looks like a tortured puppy, like with big eyes, and he's very, very sad.
And stumbling around almost, which I feel is like such a stark difference between this version of Gollum, again, which is supposed to be the first time we ever see him. He is frightening, and he's agile, and he's quiet. The way he describes being able to cross the river without a sound. So the movies they mention it in words that he's too clever a wordsman.
Yeah.
They mention that he can do all these things. We never really see him do all these things. Right? We only like know him as this like gangly creature that has been tortured and is sad. We don't really see much beyond that. We don't see his, I don't know. I'm going to use the word strength but it's not the correct term. His abilities is pretty much what I would say. And in this book, you're right. We do really see that that scene where Gollum stiffens. I physically stiffened. I stressed for Bilbo, In the movie, you're kind of like, he's invisible. We kind of know how this works. Gollum can't see anything. It's going to be fine. And I feel like that's the strike difference.
Yeah, and Bilbo, see, when correct me, or like, tell me how you visualize it when you're reading it, but in the movie, they have Bilbo actually get out his sword and like, make moves like he's about to hurt Gollum, which I guess is to like visualize how he's thinking about it. But I'm just gonna read this passage because I just love the way that it's written. So
Hmm.
Gollum is stiffened. Like, we know that he's like ready to attack Bilbo at the first sign of movement, right? Bilbo almost stopped breathing and went stiff himself. He was desperate. He must get away out of this horrible darkness while he had any strength left. He must fight. He must stab the foul thing. Put its eyes out. Kill it. It meant to kill him. No, not a fair fight. He was invisible now. Gollum had no sword. Gollum had not actually threatened to kill him, or tried to yet. And he was miserable, alone, lost. A sudden understanding, a pity mixed with horror, welled up in Bilbo's heart. A glimpse of endless, unmarked days without light or hope of betterment. Hard stone, cold fish, sneaking and whispering. All these thoughts passed in a flash of a second. He trembled, and then quite suddenly, in another flash, as if lifted by a new strength and resolve, he leaped. Not a great leap for a man, but a leap of faith in the dark.
Yeah. Still get chills. Still gets chills reading it.
Yeah.
And the problem, with adaptations is, how do you even capture that? How do you even capture that? It's tough. So this is what I say when it's a different medium, so you have to come at it differently.
Exactly.
But I love this book so much. It just really is a testament to Tolkien as a writer, and we all often forget how he is as a children's literature writer because of Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit is such a beautiful piece of work, which it's so childlike but so chilling at the same time. And that passage was the highlight of what Tolkien really can achieve here.
Yeah, agree. I think that it's like, of course they can't really show us Bilbo's thoughts there. I think that's really hard. And I think what they did with Gollum looking even more pitiful, I don't really have a problem with how it's portrayed, but I'm just saying, for the sake of if you've never read the books before, I think that it's very interesting, and it feels significant to me that Gollum wasn't looking at him like a wounded puppy, that he was springing to attack Bilbo in whatever way he could, and yet, even with the One Ring, like, I know that we don't know that it's the One Ring, but we do know it's the One Ring. Right. We know that Bilbo couldn't bring himself to hurt Gollum. A Gollum that was like decidedly mean.
Yeah.
And
he was gonna eat him, and he was poised to eat him still.
Right. At least make it so he doesn't get out with the ring. You know what I mean? And it's like, while I'm not gonna try to remember the rest of the Hobbit really right this second. I don't want to remember. I want to experience it again, through this podcast. But I will say that I am concerned that the strengths of Bilbo and I know we talked about how it's really not about Bilbo anymore, but still, I think that
it should be, but yes,
it's like the strength of Bilbo get lost in all the other madness that goes on in these films. But at least in this scene, we see a little of what makes Book Bilbo such a compelling character, and how it really it's his choices that ultimately go on to help save Middle Earth.
Yeah. I think about this scene a lot, even before we had this podcast.
Yeah.
And we had to rewatch it. That scene I think about the most, because I always have Bilbo looking at Gollum, and Gollum just looking very sad. And I think about that a lot, because that devastation that Bilbo feels envy for in the book, it's, again, you can't know that that's what he's feeling. And I would always try to think about what Bilbo is feeling in the movie, like what made him change his heart, like what sympathy did seeing Gollum's crying face made Bilbo feel? Because we'll never know that, right? We know in the book it's because he felt sympathy for he's been in the dark, he's been lonely, whatever. In the movie, he just sees a single tear, and then he doesn't kill him.
Doesn't do it.
And I'm like, I wonder, what was it for movie Bilbo? What was the change of heart there?
Yeah, because he even takes it a step further. Because I think this happens so fast in Book Bilbo's head that he doesn't reach for his sword, and also the fact that the sword glows, I think, would have been a problem. You know what I mean? Like, he says that he sheathed it, after he fell, and so I think, but this Bilbo, he takes out the sword, he's like very much going to do it, and then he sees Gollum's face, and I would hope that it's like a similar vibe, right? That it's like he, in that moment, realizes how alone and sad Gollum really is,
Yeah. It's a compelling scene. I think both in the movie and in the book. Sorry, go ahead.
I agree.
Yeah, no. Has
Callie?
Bilbo killed yet, though? Because that's sort of, for me, I think that's maybe why in the movie anyway, like in the book we get a fulsome explanation, but in the movie,
Right.
when I was watching it, I was like, maybe it's just that he hasn't done that yet, and I can imagine it takes a big step to do that for the first time. So yeah,
it's just interesting knowing what the it's just interesting knowing what the One Ring can do to somebody, even within the first few hours, minutes of having it, right? Like we know for Gollum it was like almost instantaneous, but we know that Gollum has kind of always had a little bit of bent towards the not so great. But Bilbo doesn't feel it, and ultimately that is Bilbo's disposition for good. Like that is why the ring doesn't go on to affect him as badly as it could have,
Right.
And I think that's what I mean. Bilbo is the guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, it's crazy to think that Bilbo hadn't. I mean, I don't think Bilbo uses his sword at all until the spiders, and that's why he calls it Sting, right?
Yes.
So, it is interesting that they also have movie Bilbo kind of try it out with the goblin. He tries to give it a go. Doesn't do so hot.
Not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The movie Hobbits are quite different than book Hobbits, I find. But you know what? It is you have to adapt to it. It's just it's interesting to see it side by side.
Yes, exactly.
And
it's one of those things where it's like, it's like one of those things where it's like, typically, you do your yearly reread and you read them, right? And then, or you have like a movie marathon, or you just watch them whenever, and you don't necessarily like, oh shit, that was that line. So it is interesting when I think you see different things when you do it back to back like this, which is fun.
Yeah, I was definitely more forgiving of the movie when I wasn't reading it alongside of the book. I was definitely like, this is the greatest. And then when I'm reading with the book, and I'm like, come on, okay.
I know. And there's like things where it's like, I get why they are doing things the way that they are. But there is one thing that it's like, they're not too far off, these scenes, right? And I think that's why it feels fun to watch these. I mean, it's like Bilbo is being Bilbo-y and Gollum is being Gollum. You know what I mean? Like, it's beautifully shot. It's a very well acted scene, But I think that like with the, I don't know, for me, like with the whole multiple personalities things, like I get why they did it, because Peter set that expectation up already, right? And they kind of lean into it a little bit more. But I was just thinking about like, if Peter's exaggerations in the Lord of the Rings were like a 7 or like turned up to a 7, then the Hobbit is like a 20 or like 4. And so like we have this version of Gollum, and it's like it's been like that with the dwarves, the goblins even being like not really orcs, they're kind of like this fleshier, like with everything, it's just kind of been like whoop, and it's fine until it's like not, you know what I mean? Like I think that, I don't know, like these actors are capable of like moving, subtle performances, and I really wish that they had been given the space to do more with that.
I think also it's interesting because they relied heavily on CGI for this one, whereas in Lord of the Rings and Rings of Power, they did use a lot more actual prosthetics and whatnot, and you can feel it. You can, especially that scene with Legolas going doing doing doing. It's just like it's such a stark difference. Also, the costuming is like different. The quality is different. I think it looks good, except for things here and there. Like Legolas's contacts will always
Oh, that's rough.
throw
Yeah.
me. I'm like, who did this?
I don't-
Use the same contacts from the first movie that was older.
Yeah. So strange. Did they like digitally change his eyes instead of using contacts or something? I don't know.
I don't know, because
We'll have to look that up.
Thranduil's eyes were normal.
Right.
It's only Legolas's that are weird. I know you can make it normal.
Right.
Like,
Head and
I don't-
hands.
like
Minhas
what
is
happened
focused
here?
on the important
Yeah.
details right now.
I know there are just some things where it's
like
like it takes you out of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that
Especially with the orcs and the goblins, I think.
yeah,
That's where
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I
Contrasting-
was
sorry, go
rewatching
ahead.
this part, and obviously you have to rewatch some of that goblin nonsense. Well, and Josh was like, "Oh, like what is with this great goblin? Like that is not the sound of the great goblin at all." And I'm like,
Yeah.
I know, babe. I know. Just don't worry about him. We're not talking about him this time.
Don't worry about it. We're not talking about
That great goblin,
No.
That's funny. That's like the equivalent of Thranduil in the Hobbit movies in the
Mm.
70s ones, right? There's always something. But this scene, there's always something weird.
I know.
But in this scene, Riddles in the Dark, the 70s Gollum version. So one of the things, I feel like the 70s Gollum version is very smooth, and this Gollum is very like more in your face kind of scary. It's the
Yeah.
best way to describe it. And even the way they say Gollum exemplifies that. Like Andy Serkis's Gollum is like Gollum, right? But in the 70s one, he's like Gollum, more like a frog. And I think that those interpretations already set up the differences between the two creatures. And I think it was a really interesting creative choice.
Yeah.
And I think they both work for what they
Yeah.
were trying to achieve, for what the characters were. And then when you read it in the book, because when you read the book for the first time, I remember when I was reading it when I was 10, and I didn't have any idea what any of them sounded like.
Yeah.
I don't know how I imagined people like just Gollum. Like, how do you
I can't
imagine
remember either. I think I was probably closer to Andy's version, but I can't confirm that because now I feel like there's a lot of my brain that's just like there are certain parts where it's like I'm rereading like Lord of the Rings, for example, and
Mhm.
I just see scenes from the movie, but then if there's a scene from the movie that was left out, then I can kind of see it again, like how I saw it when I was 11 or whatever. Yeah, it's hard to say what I
Right.
thought originally.
Yeah, it is hard
I
to
think
say.
the book describes it as being like phlegmy, so I had it being as like a harsher like
Yeah.
noise. Yeah, but
Yeah, like he's trying to
I
get
would have
something up.
preferred Gollum. That's so
But
cute.
that's
to
why,
think
and
about.
it is so cute. And in the 70s one, he does look more like a frog, kind of lizard froggy
He
thing.
does. Yeah.
So there is that interpretation is linked directly to the way he looks. And if you look at a lot of the artwork, as I mentioned before any of the movies came out, he does look a lot like a frog or a lizard. So I think that interpretation comes from somewhere. And when you're thinking about the evolution of language, and how since so many of these people before the movies came out had this similar idea, but now we think of it as a phlegmy cough, like something changed over time, right? And that's that's what's great about having a book that's been around for over 100 years.
Wow.
Like over close to 100 years.
Right.
It's,
wow.
Yeah, it's like the language and interpretation just changes over time.
Yeah,
and it's
definitely.
in the time, it's universal, right? Listen, everybody was thinking about Gollum like a frog before, and now everyone thinks of him as this like phlegmy, coffee dude.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and it's like, especially if like you're making those additions and Lord of the Rings doesn't even exist yet. Like, why not? He could look like anything, you know?
He could look like anything,
and he's like described as like dark. But I'm not really sure what Tolkien means when he says that. Like, is it just because it like everything is dark? Like, you can't see shit down there. What do you mean?
Yeah. He was Gollum as dark as darkness, except for two big, round, pale eyes in his thin face.
But I just think that means that it was already so dark that you can't really see him that well.
Yeah. And when you hear that and you think of Andy Serkis's Gollum, that's a pretty accurate description.
Yeah, he's all
Especially,
eyes.
yeah, the
He's
eyes.
all eyes.
When you first see Gollum, they really do have that reflective thing that we see in animals today, where the light behind the eyes. Where they describe that in the book as well.
Yes,
where his eyes turn green, and I
what
was
the
like,
thing
whoa.
with Gollum and his eyes turning green is always when he's being a stinker. Like
Right.
it's this. I mean, it's almost like maybe he becomes more animal-like when he's in a bad mood. You know what I mean? Because he does it in Lord of the Rings too, where it's like, you know, something's about to go down if you see like green in his eyes, which is like, it has to be that like reflective quality. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
Right.
know how you just like change your eyes like that. You know?
Yeah. The way I think they described it in the book was his eyes grew so big because he was trying to see in the dark, which scientifically doesn't make sense, but it makes sense when you're reading. You're like, oh yeah, because you're always like trying to see. When you see Gollum's, this is not about The Hobbit, but it's about in Lord of the Rings. I apologize, but when you see that tradition in the Return of the King, and you literally see his eyes grow bigger like that without reading the description in the book, you're like, how did that happen? But you're like, it's because he was trying to see in the dark.
Can't see shit.
His eyes grow so huge from trying to see in the dark. Equivalent to elf vision science, right? Because it's like technically they shouldn't be able to see like that because of the curvature of the earth, but you're like, you just accept it because
you just accept it.
Yeah, you just accept it. His eyes grew so big because it was so dark. That's just how the world works here.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about like the transformation of Gollum from like somebody that's not too far away from a Hobbit to just like this. Yeah, he just doesn't. It's like he can't even register him as a person. I know that like obviously that the point is to try to see Gollum as a person, you know.
But even the narrator, who is not Bilbo but is a third person narrator.
Oh my gosh, this is the judgiest version of Tolkien you are ever gonna see.
Yeah, he's like, this creature. He keeps calling him this creature. Oh, memory, he's so gross. Like, he literally calls Gollum gross over and over again. He's like, when he was less wicked, and now he's gross.
He's slimy and
flappy.
I know. Well, we were talking about last time about how he talks about the orcs and how they're like, you know, it's very. I don't know. We talked about the differences between how we talk about orcs in Lord of the Rings versus in this one. And this one, it's like things are very black and white in The Hobbit, which is like a kid's book, you know.
Yeah.
Like these guys are bad. Gollum is bad, but Bilbo sees something that, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah, this is very judgy Tolkien narrator.
This
I
guy's
thought of it like that. Now I do.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
It's so funny. Yeah. He did not like Gollum.
He didn't hold back. He was like, that's a bad guy. That's a bad guy. He's like, you don't even, I'm going to spell it out. He's a bad guy. Like,
he's ugly. And once he had a grandmother.
Yeah.
One time. But back to him being ugly.
Yeah.
He hated thinking about his grandma.
I know, but good for Bilbo for, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, I feel like Tolkien would have given Bilbo a pass for stabbing him, but
yeah. And you know what? Going back to what you were saying about Bilbo being one of the most admirable hobbits, and you're right, this really exemplifies that. And I always wonder, poor Frodo, but I always wonder what would have happened if Gandalf had clocked that this was the One Ring earlier, and if Bilbo had to be the one to take it to the mountain as opposed to Frodo, because it seemed out of everyone, Bilbo was one of the most resistant to the power of the ring. Yeah. Frodo was very strong. Like, don't get me wrong. He was unbelievably strong. But Bilbo had that ring for so long, and it didn't weigh on him the same way it did on Gollum. You started to see glimpses of it here and there, but not in the same way. Like, it destroyed Gollum completely. Frodo really felt the weight of it within a shorter span of time.
Yeah.
And it just makes me wonder.
That's an interesting point, because there are so many things where, like, I feel like we've done thought experiments before. Maybe it's time for another one about, like, what if? Because, like, I think that Aragorn had to be part of this in some way, because he was literally waiting for the One Ring to be found to reforge his sword. That's the whole thing, right? Obviously in the book, movie Aragorn, I cannot say. He was like 20 or something, in his 20s when this is all going down, and 20s Aragorn is off like fighting for Rohan and fighting for Gondor and like traveling around because Elrond was like, you gotta get some shit under your belt before you try to marry my daughter, and he's like, okay.
Right.
You know, and it's not until he's like 40 or something that Arwen is like, yeah, I'll marry you, you know? So we're not even there yet. Would we? I don't know. Okay, so I'm like thinking like, so Gandalf, because Gandalf at this point does know that it's Sauron in Dol Guldur, and it's just him trying to convince other people to take action on it, you know? And Bilbo hides, like, he figures out that he's got a ring, or he's got something's going on.
Yeah, but it could be a petty ring. It could be. It doesn't necessarily have to be a ring of power, because it has been described in lore that there are petty rings that have like does whatever here and there. But it's not necessarily that it's a powerful ring, which is why this one got really pulled under the radar for so long, especially because Bilbo was so resistant to the ring. So it's a combination of those two things.
So like, let's say Gandalf, you know, post adventure, I know they hang out with the Beorn for a little bit. They hang out in Dale for a little bit before they head all the way up to the Shire. I'm just thinking, like, logistically, it would have been nicer if they had been on that side of the Misty Mountains, but and also, it isn't until around this time that Sauron gets pushed out of Dol Guldur, literally right before the Battle of the Five Armies. So, oh my god, this is so weird to think. So, like, say he accidentally drops it into a fireplace. I don't know. And then that's when it would have shown him, like, definitively what the ring was. So, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of, like, what Gandalf would do. And he's a hard guy to predict.
He is a hard guy to predict.
So I'm like, okay, so does he go to Elrond with it? Does he go to Galadriel with this? Like,
and where is
he
Saruman?
Doesn't know that.
He might not. Was Saruman even evil at that point, or not evil? Okay,
he is, but Gandalf doesn't know it. Gandalf it is not confirmed to Gandalf until Lord of the Rings. But so the thing with Saruman at this point is he is looking for the ring himself, and he is like trying to avoid the Dol Guldur thing because it isn't until he realized that Sauron is also realizing the history of the ring. Like, Saruman already knows, but then when he realized that Sauron has also figured out where the last time they saw the ring was, is when he decides to push him out of Dol Guldur. He just goes to Mordor, but not, you know, it doesn't really work that great, but you know, for Saruman's purposes, it works. So, oh my god, I'm just thinking, like, if Gandalf had gone to Saruman, I think we would have been fucked. Like, legitimately, I think he would have said whatever it took, and then he would have just taken it. And then we have...
Yeah. That's probably likely what would have happened, to be honest.
Oh, it's so stressful.
Everything happens for a reason, it's fine. Everything will be okay.
Literally, I think that is the story for Lord of the Rings. Like, if... Because Aragorn had to be ready for that, and he was by that point, right? Like, with things like Boromir's death, like, it had to happen the way it happened. Like, if Faramir had gone with them, I think it would have been a problem. They wouldn't have split up. I think, you know, all of that. If there had been a larger party than just Frodo and Sam going to Mordor, I think it would have been a bad deal. It's interesting to think, like, maybe they don't tell Saruman. Maybe they tell Galadriel instead, or Elrond or something.
But why would they do that?
I don't know. I can't think of a reason.
But, you know, it is interesting to have these thought experiments. It's fun. It's fun to talk about.
I know. But, I'm just thinking, like, say he drops it into a fire when they're in Rivendell, and Elrond is like, the fuck is this? I don't know. Because Elrond, I mean, do they hold a council then? Who would show up? I don't even know.
Right. Like, and I could actually see it dropping into a fire, because the ring likes to, like, slip off people's, like, fingers, and they could be just, like, having a party, and it, like, falls into the fire. Right. Like, I could see it. Like,
I know. Everybody just be having this ring loosey-goosey in their pockets. Yeah. I never understood that.
Even in this book, when he has the ring on, and suddenly he's with the orcs, it's off. It's off. Like in his pocket again. Because the ring has a mind of its own.
It's like, yo, I'm right here.
Yeah.
The ring
he
wants
the passages
to be with a bad guy.
just suddenly in front of all these orcs, and the ring isn't on his finger. And I was like, was that the ring's? What was the ring's will in that moment? Well, it was obviously trying to be. Oh my gosh, I wrote the goblins, but
yes. Well, and there's a point where Gollum is super upset about losing the ring, and he's basically like, after all these ages, it's almost like Gollum knew that the ring would be, it's like an asshole, you know what I mean? Right. That like he's like, damn it, you know, like he knows that the ring I'm like, has the ring pulled something like this before, you know?
Yeah, like try to escape from him before, and he's always like, haha, not this time, gotcha.
Yeah, that's kind of, I kind of feel like he understands the ring better than we give him credit for, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he's had it for 500 years. There's no reason why he wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The ins and outs of what, like, the love of his life, right?
Creepy.
Yeah.
Hates it and loves it.
Yeah.
Awful. But yeah, I think, I mean, say we do see it in Rivendell. I don't know. Because, I don't know. I'm just trying to think like Elrond's instinct.
Thought experiments hurt my brain.
I know, it's hard. I think if we go to Saruman, we know it's over, right? Yeah. We've got a Saruman versus Sauron situation, and it's not good. But then with like Rivendell, I think like if Elrond had realized, because before the council wasn't really called, it just kind of happened. Like everybody else had news to share, and they went to Rivendell to share it, and it just worked out like that. So if it's just like becomes like the elves' problem,
it would have been different. Like the men and the dwarves wouldn't have been there.
They wouldn't have asked them to be.
Yeah.
And you know, was it? Who was it? It wasn't Glorfindel that was like, "What if we put it in the ocean?" Was that one of them? I don't know. Somebody at the council.
There was a bunch of like random suggestions. But you know what? It's hard. What would you do in your life? You'd be like, I don't know. Why don't we just throw it in the ocean?
Yeah.
I think about
maybe they would have. And then
it worked on one of the Cimmerals, right? Yeah. So like, why wouldn't it work on the One Ring?
Fair point.
Logically, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that ring would have
found its way
out. Yeah. I bet, and it could have been even different with like, was it Olmo, who would have been like, yeah, I'll take the Cimmeral, but I don't want your fucking ring, you know? Like,
I don't want that. Gross.
Yeah. Ugh. Nasty.
Cimmerals are beautiful. Yeah. This ring is gross and ugly. Tastes like darkness.
Yeah. So
it's like the token narrator of Gollum.
A little bit. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was fun.
Yeah.
I think, I think we kind of know, but as far as how it would actually go down, it's hard to say. I don't think it would be good. I think that's what we can confirm.
Yeah. But
yeah, I've thought about that too, or even like if Bilbo had somehow magically gotten all the way to Mordor with it, like who would be Bilbo's buddy? Bilbo's kind of a loner.
He is a loner.
Whereas Frodo has like the support system, you know?
Yeah. Frodo and Sam are that dynamic team that allowed because the ring is really good at getting hold of one person, but when there's like two people, that power balance I think was also really what offshot the ring's success in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even Gollum, like, does Gollum help Bilbo? I don't think so. You know what I mean? There's bad blood there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas with Frodo, like, yeah, he is trying to be an asshole, but like ultimately Frodo is able to like be the bigger person in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah. And it is Gollum that destroys the ring.
Yep.
Ultimately, it isn't even Frodo, right? So.
Yeah. Gollum, I think, has to be there, but I don't think it would have gone as well with Bilbo and Gollum. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because Bilbo he tricked him once, so he really like let him trick him again.
I think this is one of those situations where, now that we've talked about it, where it's all the odds are to lose except for one odd to win, and we were in that one scenario where it won.
Yes,
I feel like Sauron was so close to, like, at so many points to getting the ring and winning, so close.
Yeah.
So I think that was the one universe in which everything worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's like, yeah, because if Bilbo tried to go at it, like, say they send a company with Bilbo, say that's we somehow get to that point. It probably would have been too many people. Like more than a couple of hobbits is too easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if Gollum, I don't think Gollum would have really like inserted himself if it had been more people. He doesn't really try to go for it until Aragorn is gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think Gollum would have helped unless everybody else had dipped. And who would be Bilbo's second? That is like, if it's just Bilbo and Gollum, it's no. No. If they try to go through the Black Gate, no. We know that's not going to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How Gollum was the only answer for the Shelob thing. And yeah.
Yeah. Everything happened for a reason.
Yeah.
And that reason is Tolkien is very smart.
Yes. it's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's also funny because like I always think about him writing Lord of the Rings, and it's like the tale grew in the telling, right? He just didn't really have a direction for it. He just was writing, and it just kind of happened the way it happened. I mean, obviously revisions and stuff happened, but like ultimately it just kind of like came out the way it came out,
Mm-hmm.
And then with The Hobbit, it's just like, I mean, it's a fun romp.
Yeah, and this is the chapter he changed. This is the chapter that we see differently than the original.
Yes.
The original run, and I think about that a lot because I don't know what the original run said, and they're talking about the ring. There is more emphasis on the ring, and how it affected Gollum, and how it was a little bit more trickier. So apparently that's what was changed, and I'm like, well, what? How was it in the original?
Well, I know in the original that Gollum actually just gives it to him. Like he's
Really?
like, "Oh, you won, fair and square. Here you go."
Oh, really?
He's just like, yeah, that's. And I will say that something we didn't talk about is how the riddle game is sacred.
Yeah.
And that there are like even like wicked creatures don't cheat. I mean, typically Gollum's
and then Bilbo cheated.
Bilbo cheats, and he's like, and it says that he wasn't really following like the ancient laws, so like it wasn't even really a riddle. So it's like, and again, I don't fully think I understand the riddle game because the way Gollum in both the book and the movie, he said, "Okay, one more," and I'm like, but you all answered all of them. What if you answer this one again? How do you determine a loser if you just say one more, but everyone answered all the questions?
Yeah.
Go until you lose, I guess?
Yeah, but Gollum said one more at the end. How?
Right.
If he won, did he win? Is that what he was playing at? That he would answer it and then he would just declare himself the winner?
Yeah, that is weird. Yeah, that I guess Jackson doesn't know the ancient laws.
Yeah. but he does that in the book too. Gollum says one more, and it's like, okay, because Gollum was starting to get hungry. He was over it.
Oh.
He's over it in both.
Oh yeah, that's weird. Yeah, what are these rules?
What are the rules? I don't know, but they're ancient.
You know what? Gollum maybe broke the rule because Bilbo broke the rule. It could have been one of those situations.
Yeah, everybody just be breaking this rule.
Yeah, he's like, you know what? This is a weird riddle. I'm also going to put my little rule break in there and ask for another chance because I feel like, and if I were Gollum, I'd be like, that's not a fair question.
Yeah, I would ask come up with a riddle.
Yeah, like, give us a real one.
Yeah, poor Gollum.
I know. I do feel bad for him sometimes. Like, I get why Bilbo was like, this sucks. Yeah. I would hate to be you too, you know? Like, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, but I think there are some dudes on the internet that would be like, well, your life sucks, so I'll just kill you. Yeah. No harm, no foul.
But that's why those are not Bilbo. Bilbo's are not. I know. No, I totally agree with you.
Be like Bilbo.
Be like
what
Bilbo.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because if you kill Gollum, you're definitely not getting the destruction of the ring. You're just not.
Yeah. That's it. You just doomed the world.
Yeah.
Thanks
so,
a lot.
Dude bros.
Yeah.
You're not listening to this. What am I saying? That's not our audience.
If you've made it this far in the podcast,
I'm shocked. Like and subscribe.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I think there is only one other note that I had for this. Feel free to let me know if you all have any other notes. But there is one thing that I would have really liked Martin Freeman to do, which is when he falls and he wakes up in the book, he checks to make sure that his pipe isn't broken and that he
Yeah.
still has his tobacco, and then is immediately devastated when he doesn't have his matches. And he's like
Yeah.
reasons to himself, like, yeah, I shouldn't light a match in here, but I would have liked to know that I could have.
I could have.
Yeah.
Yeah. His like priorities are so straight. He's like, my weed.
I know. And I'm like, this is peak Hobbit behavior, and I would
Yeah.
have loved to see Martin Freeman do it. Just selfishly. Like, not narratively or anything. I just think it would have been adorable, and
Yeah.
I would like to see
Would have
it.
just taken a second, just a quick second.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, despite TLDR, in conclusion, despite my criticism of a back-to-back read of the movie and watching the book,
Yeah.
you know, it's when I watch the movie by itself and I don't read the book,
Yeah.
I have a really fun time.
Yeah.
Like,
but it's totally fair.
But now I know why a lot of people are so. I mean, I always knew. I just like don't like hearing it over and over again because it's like the same stuff. But it's like, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it's like I'm not. I think that I think it's wonderful that people can like truly love this and separate it in their brains. I struggle with that. That is a personal failing. That is not like a failing of the film. Do you know what I mean? And like the whole like with this season, where before I think we were trying to be more like, oh, did I like this change? Was this change legit? You know, like did it make it better? Whatever. I think for this one, I'm not doing that so much as it's just being like, you know what, this is something that would have been cool, or this is something that a difference that I think is worth noting, but not like I don't think it really needs that like extra like it was a bad choice. You know, I think that the only thing that I will say is that like I love Bilbo so much. I wanted it to be more Bilbo, but like that personally, but there are so many other points to love in this, and you know, I do think that seeing more of the dwarves, it is fun. Like there's so much that just straight up fun in this movie, and I think that that's totally valid and what a lot of people want from their movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's more for a general audience than just for Tolkien fans. I think one thing that we often have to remember is filmmakers, the production company anyways, don't care. No. They care about the mass, not the few. So when you're watching anything, it's not always the director's fault. They are often strong-held into making certain creative decisions as well. So because Jackson did not want this to be 3 films, and it shouldn't have been, right? But you know, he did what he could. He did what he could with it. Yeah.
I think that so many people have, you know, it's not like these movies are obscure. There's a lot of hype, right? And I think a lot of people, you know, who were too young or not even born yet for Lord of the Rings, this was their intro to Middle Earth. And, you know, I think there's always going to be like something special about your introduction to something, you know, even if it doesn't stay your favorite, or maybe it stays your favorite just for the nostalgia factor. Do you know what I mean? I think that there's so much going for it, truly, that it's like, it doesn't have to be your favorite. And I'll say this about any adaptation or any movie, right? Like, it doesn't have to be your favorite, but there are a lot of things that it brought to changed for the fandom, and I think that have been largely good things, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely has its place in the world. Like we all do. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I think we give the cartoons so much more leeway and like maybe their age or whatever, but I think that this is just cartoony. You know what I mean? Like it deserves just as much of a pass for things.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. Because if you watch the cartoon or even the Lord of the Rings movies, it's like there's still a stark amount of differences from the books and the movies. Even Jackson's original stuff has a lot of deviations, right? So it's just up to us to decide, do we like it or not? And it's both those answers are okay.
Yeah.
But the reason shouldn't be because it's different.
Yes.
Because it's going to be different.
It's going to be different. And also it's like, I don't get any enjoyment out of like yucking someone's yum, as they say. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there it has so many good things about it that we have been having fun rewatching it, even if there are things that I disagree with, you know what I mean, that I would have done differently. But I've had people give me fair points for why they like certain changes, and I'm like, hey, I like that. I like it when you tell me that you know what I mean? Like, I think that makes me feel better about like, oh, you're seeing it that way. That's really helpful to me. Like, because there's just some things that my brain is like not gonna think of, you know?
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Were there any other moments? Did we miss anything? Did I gloss over anything, Callie or Minhas, that you wanted to talk about in this one?
Not within this chapter, no.
Okay.
I think we are good.
Okay.
This was an awesome episode.
This was an awesome episode.
As I expected it to be. But
it was, great chapter, great company. How could it go wrong?
Right. Yeah. Riddles and Dark is so good.
It is good. It's a good chapter.
Yeah. It's a fun one. And yeah, I think it's one of the standout moments in the movie as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. Ironically, because you would think it'd be the big battles and stuff. No, like these are the moments that really make the movie fun. So even the stuff that wasn't in the book that are in the movies, like just you can have your feelings toward Tariel. You can have whatever feelings you want toward Tariel, but like the scenes between her and Keely, like those are more powerful than like just the fights, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like these character moments.
Yeah, I think that's what resonates the most with me personally.
Yeah,
that sentiment has been a running theme on this podcast for sure. Yeah.
We have a vibe. We like what we like. What can I say? So, I mean, if that's all we've got, I'm going to remind everyone to please follow Minhas on social media. And, while you're at it, follow us too. We're on Twitter and Instagram, and also now on Patreon, if that is your thing. I will just note that our Patreon's a little different than maybe what you've seen or subscribed to previously. There are no tiers. You can pay whatever you want, like $1, $10, $50. Don't do $50. But if
you do, we'll put it to good use.
So we're going to be putting extras on there, our notes, extra bonus episodes, clips that don't maybe make it to social media, or parts of the podcast that we cut out, just for the funsies. And so we hope to see you there. And, we appreciate all of your support, whether or not you become a patron, including if you're leaving reviews. And recently I saw that our friend Jochen left this gem of a review. You may know him as that German Tolkien guy on TikTok. And he wrote, "One of the best Tolkien podcasts out there." Obviously, this is his opinion. I'm not saying it. This is what Jochen wrote.
We didn't say it. This is what someone else said.
This is what somebody else said. Hey, whether you're a newcomer to Tolkien, someone just exploring his works, or a longtime fan, this podcast is awesome, fun, informative, very knowledgeable, and honestly just beautiful to complement your reading or satisfy your curiosity. 10 out of 10. Don't miss it. So obviously, if you made it this far, you're not really missing it. But if you want us to read your review, go leave one, and I will add that as a fun segment. So hear your words out of my mouth, or Callie's mouth, or our guest's mouth. You never know. So thank you again to Callie and Minhas. This has been so lovely. Really, really enjoyed it, and we hope to see you all very soon.